Remember when the New York Times hired an overt racist, Sarah Jung, who for years was posting racist crap on Twitter, never got banned for it, then gets hired at the paper of record? Would I be at all surprised to find out what's happened as of late in the New York Times? No. New York Times pathetic excuse for printing anti-Semitic cartoon. You thought that Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's comment about foreign loyalty or Benjamins were problematic? The international edition of the New York Times just said, let me show you what we can do. In fact, they said, hold my beer, Elon. We're going to double down and post some of the most fringe anti-Semitic insane. Wow. This is an impressive feat of anti-Semitism. Let's pull up this tweet so I can truly show you this photo they posted, and we'll read through the opinion piece because, god damn, New York Times going all out. Look at this image. You have a blind Jewish Trump being led by a dog, Netanyahu, as a dog with a Star of David on his neck. Wow. Damn. There's a lot of things here, okay? Because some people have asked me, like, why is it anti-Semitic the New York Times posted this? The idea that the Jews control the world, leading Donald Trump, who's wearing a yarmulke, and then we have the depiction of a Jew with a Star of David on his neck as an animal. Listen, when it comes to issues of anti-Semitism, like what we're seeing from Ilhan Omar, I want to point a few things out. I definitely think you'll see Republicans, like the right, go really, really hard. I think Ben Shapiro pushes way too hard on Ilhan Omar. Because Ilhan Omar isn't overtly anti-Semitic, she's crop dusting. That's what I call it. Crop dusting is a reference when the planes get really low and almost touch the ground but don't quite do it. This, on the other hand, impressively anti-Semitic. A depiction of a Jewish leader as a dog with a Star of David on his neck, blindly leading the president of the United States. Wow! Harry Kachatrian said, in the New York Times International, Bibi Netanyahu characterized as a dog leading a blind Jewish Trump. When did the New York Times hire David Duke as an editor? Can I point out, too, I believe it was David Duke who praised Ilhan Omar over her sentiments about Israel. You absolutely can criticize Israel, but for the love of God, not like this. Jeez. Here's the thing. You want to talk about the problems on the left. Okay, look, I get it. There are anti-Semitic people who are associated with right-wing groups. There's problems of right-wing violence. But that stuff isn't institutional, okay? This is the New York Times, for the love of God. This is the Democratic Party. There are some fringe wackaloon Republicans. Of course there are. They're slowly being removed. Steve King said some dumb things, and they kicked him off every committee. Ilhan Omar said some dumb things, and they say, don't worry about it. We'll cover for you. The New York Times is doing this. Listen, the Women's March, okay? Prominent, one of the largest protests in history, led by overt anti-Semites. New York Times even reported on it. The New York Times themselves report on the anti-Semitism. Ilhan Omar is in the periphery of that group. She's what they call a fellow traveler. Her and her friends push the narrative, speak at these events. AOC spoke at the Women's March, even when most people disavowed Nancy Pelosi. I believe Nancy Pelosi disavowed the Women's March because we know they believe these insane anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Look at this. This blew my mind. I cannot believe this. The New York Times published this. All right, let's look at this. Look at a sad waste of a crisis on immigration. And there's the image. Let's see what the op-ed says from the Jerusalem Post. At a time of rising anti-Semitism, when we have become increasingly exposed to the notion of dog whistles and tropes that are anti-Semitic, when there is a lively and active debate about the issue in the U.S., the New York Times International Edition did the equivalent of saying, hold my beer. You thought that Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's comments about foreign loyalty or Benjamins were problematic. The International Edition of the Times just said, let me show you what we can do. With a cartoon of a yarmulke-wearing blind U.S. President Donald Trump being led by a dog with a Star of David collar and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's face for a head. I didn't believe the cartoon was real when I first saw it. Many of my colleagues didn't believe it either. I spent all Saturday trying to track down a hard copy. I phoned friends. I got a PDF of the edition. And even then, I didn't believe it. I had to see for myself. So I drove to a 24-hour supermarket. There on the newsstand was the April 25th edition. I flipped gingerly through, fearing to see page 16, and then I found it. It stared back at me. The horrid image of a blind U.S. President Donald Trump with a yarmulke being led by a dog with the face of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Worse, the dog was wearing a Star of David as a collar. God damn. New York Times! Woo! Well, the New York Times did take it down. They issued a statement or something. So as I say, this is what the New York Times thinks of us Israelis. Even if they subsequently said it was an error, they thought it was okay to print a cartoon showing the U.S. president being blindly led by the Jewish dog. So here's the thing. As I mentioned about crop dusting. Crop dusting is just a phrase that, it comes from like skateboarding, when tricks are so low to the ground, they graze the ground. And so I use it to reference like getting as close as possible to something without actually engaging in it. I think Ilhan Omar crop dusts anti-Semitism. You know, she says what all about the Benjamins, and she says hypnotizing the world. Things that are often associated with tropes, but she's just not quite saying it, right? So she can get away with it. This, on the other hand, is like, wow, they just crashed straight into the ground. The left is becoming overtly racist and anti-Semitic. And that's the point of this. What more evidence do you need? Seriously, what more evidence do you need? Okay, the New York Times is considered a left-leaning source. They're reputable for the most part. They hired Sarah Jung, okay, an overt racist. They published an op-ed critical of interracial dating. Why? And they do this because, oh my God, I was talking to a friend and I said, listen, man, if you were to take what they're doing, it seems like they're engaging in what's called black propaganda. They are bringing on actual white supremacists and neo-Nazis to pretend to oppose them in such a way that it benefits their core ideology, identitarianism. Look at this. We know that the Women's March on the far left and the alt-right don't like Jewish people and are critical in the exact same way. And they reach the same end goals. When Sarah Jung got hired, the white nationalists were praising the New York Times. I'm not exaggerating. These are real. They were saying things like, if only we had 1,000 more Sarah Jungs. Because what they see is the New York Times doing this pushes their ideology. They don't like Jewish people. When the New York Times hires Sarah Jung, they believe it forces white people to recognize racial identity, creating more white nationalists. These are bad things. The New York Times, at this point, I would argue, is overtly identitarian. There's left and right identitarian, or as you can call it, white or anti-white identitarian, but they serve the same goal. It should be obvious to anyone at this point. When they try and claim all Asians are the exact same race, they're not. Some are Middle Eastern, some are Indian, some are Chinese, some are Japanese, some are Laotian, some are Filipino. They try and claim it's all one group. Why? Because they are racists. They are racist. How hard is it to not be racist? And it's funny because you'll hear them say the same thing. And it's not hard. It is not. Let's read a little bit more. And not only that, those who watched as it went to print thought it was fine to put a Jewish skull cap on the U.S. president. Dual loyalty? No need to even wrestle with that question. Yeah, it's literally the president being led blindly by the dog. It's not a dual loyalty. That's overt loyalty to a foreign country. It used to be that we were told that Trump was fostering Trump anti-Semitism, oh please, and driving a new wave of anti-Semitism in the U.S. But the cartoon depicts him as a Jew. Well, which is it? Is he fostering anti-Semitism? Or is he now a closet Jew being led by Israel depicted as a Jewish dog? We used to say that images conjured up memories of 1930s anti-Semitism. That didn't conjure it up. This showed us exactly what it looked like. The Nazis also depicted, I don't want to say us, they also depicted Jews as animals. They also put Stars of David on Jews. Anti-Semitism have compared them to dogs, pigs, and monkeys before. It used to be that it was on the far right that Jews were depicted as controlling the world, like an octopus or a spider, but now we see how mainstream it has become to blame Jews and Israel for the world's problems. Why do you think someone like Linda Sarsour can be at a private meeting for the Women's March, talk about all of these ridiculous anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, be cherished, held up, and defended by left-wing politicians? Ocasio-Cortez spoke at the Women's March. Everyone else disavowed it. They said they wouldn't go. Now, I do want to point out the Women's March tried fracturing off and disavowing, but for the most part, the organizations remained solid, and many of the far left still defended it. It may be true that AOC was speaking at the disavowed one. I'm not entirely sure. But at any rate, I feel like they should just back off entirely. When Ilhan Omar comes out and says a bunch of things that are really, really close to being anti-Semitic, and even apologizes for some of the things she says, saying she didn't realize, you have to recognize they come from a culture where they are racist anti-Semites that are almost no different from what they claim to be fighting. As I mentioned, talking to my friend, it feels like black propaganda. You look at the Huffington Post, you look at New York Times, and many other sources against interracial dating. You look at the story I just did before this video, where they view the world through a lens where they do not believe cultures can mix. They do not believe that races can mix. And it's no surprise they write op-eds in the New York Times opposing race mixing. It's no surprise to me that they're anti-Semites, because we've known they are. They try and deny it, but it's mind-blowing to me, especially when they try and claim, that Jews somehow have more power than anyone else, which is wrong. Certainly there are people within the Jewish community who are successful. I won't deny that. I don't care either. If you work hard to succeed, good for you. I don't care about these fringe opinions of these wackaloons who believe in some kind of Jewish privilege. They're weirdos. And that's the idea that they push. And it's easily rejected when you realize the New York Times and many mainstream publications do not like Jewish people. How does this get published? You have to ask yourself, how, if they are somehow in control of everything, something like this can get to print? Surely someone, anyone at this company could be like, oh, let's not depict Jewish people as dogs. No, it gets through. And it's mind-blowing to me, because you see this stuff happen all the time, and they don't call it out. They don't call it out because they're crazy people. Look at it. The cartoon doesn't even have anything to do with the article below it. It's as if the editors went, interesting article, but we need more anti-Semitism. My God. You know what? I got one more video coming up for you in a few minutes. I'll see you then.